Okay, I'm going to get started and put up the chat box in case anyone wants to ask questions while I go through it. All right, he starts on like meaning of money here, and he talks a little about the barter system and why it doesn't work. Because if Ross wants cows, I have to have cows, and I might want something else, and Ross doesn't have. You have to have that double coincidence, and that made it hard. He then talks about the three uses of money. The first one being the medium of exchange. Medium of exchange is an item buyers give to sellers in exchange for goods and services. So medium of exchange is an item that buyers give to sellers in exchange for goods and services. And that's what we do all the time, right? We go to the store, we buy food, and we give the owner or someone money, which is the medium of exchange, in exchange for goods or services. The second one is unit of account. That's using money to put a value on an item. So that's using money to put a value on an item. And that would be like my computer cost $800. That would be unit of account. And the third is store of value, and that's saving for the future. So that could be like putting money in a savings account, saving money for college, putting money in a piggy bank. All of those are store of value. So medium of exchange, using money like to pay for goods and services. Unit of account, using money to establish a value. And then store of value, saving money for the future. So those would be the three ways. Then he talked about liquidity. And liquidity is the ease in which an asset can be converted into a country's medium of exchange. The ease in which an asset can be converted into a country's medium of exchange. And if I was like trying to go through a couple of things, like the M1 is very liquid. Obviously currency is liquid. Demand deposits like checks are very liquid. Savings account, I mean, especially now because you can pull money out of, your savings account. So like, currency, demand deposit, money markets, those are very liquid. Now, things that are less liquid are like your car or your house. So if I were putting them in order, I would say like currency, demand deposits, which are checks, right? Money market, and then selling your car, and then last, selling your house. Okay. And then he talks about M1 and M2. M1 is savings, your savings account, demand deposits, currency, and mutual money markets. Now, the book also calls traveler's checks. Traveler's checks are things that we don't really use anymore, but, just keep that in mind because it could pop into the quiz that way. So savings, demand deposits, currency, mutual money market, and traveler's checks. M2 is everything in M1 with, hold it, those mutual money markets. That was my mistake. So it's savings, M1, savings, demand deposits, currency, and traveler's checks. M2 is everything in M1 and time deposits and money markets. All right, so the money markets are in M2. All right. The kinds of money. So then he talks about two really kinds of money. All right. One is commodity money, and commodity money has intrinsic value. So if it wasn't used for money, it would still be valuable. Gold is commodity money, like cigarettes are commodity money. All right. So commodity money has intrinsic value. And then he talks about fiat money, which has no intrinsic value. And that you could think of as our paper money. Okay. Now, why is that paper money valuable? Because it's accepted in trade. And if I go to the store, someone's going to take it and I could buy things. That's why it's valuable. If people didn't take it in trade, it would not be valuable. All right, then the chapter moves to money in the US economy. And just know again, demand deposits are checking accounts, currency is paper bills and coins. Demand deposits are checking accounts, currency is paper bills and coins. And he talks about where is the currency. Because like, everyone should be walking around with like $5,000 because there's so much currency, but a lot of it's held in foreign countries because the dollar is trusted. Like people feel it's stable. And so a lot of foreign country people hold on to the US dollar. And then there's people who make money illegally and they like hide the money or keep it in safe deposit boxes. All right. The Federal Reserve System, they're in charge of monetary policy. So the Fed Reserve, they're in charge of the monetary policy. Sometimes it's called the central bank. It's considered the bank for banks. All right, then he starts talking about banks, and you have the fractional and you have the 100%. All right, the 100% reserve banking, all right, that's just a safe place to keep your money. So you put your money in the bank does not loan out any money, money supply doesn't increase. So the 100% deposit it's a safe place to keep your money. They don't lend out money and money supply does not increase. Then he gets into like where we've spent a good amount of time, money creation with fractional reserve. So the fractional system is banks hold on to a fraction. Banks hold on to a fraction of the demand deposits and loan out the rest. So here, and remember, this is the limited reserve, not what we learned today, but the limited reserve. So Ross puts in, $100. The bank holds on to 10. That's the reserve requirement. I made the required reserve ratio 0.1 there, and it loans out 90. Okay, so that is the fractional reserve. Remember, the money multiplier is 1 over the reserve requirement. 1 over the reserve requirement. And for the money multiplier to work, households have to put money in the bank. So all you guys have to put money in the bank. So the bank has, so they can put some in required reserve, but they have a lot of other money to lend out. And then the banks have to lend it out. All right. So you need households to put money in the bank and you need bankers to lend out the money. All right. Then he talks in limited reserve system, the 3 shifters of money supply. Okay. One, and that's ROD. One is the reserve requirement, which is the minimum banks must hold in reserves. Now, this is the minimum. So if John deposits $1,000 and the reserve requirement is 10%, the minimum is 100, but the bank could hold all 1,000, but the minimum is 100. You lower the reserve requirement to increase the money supply. You lower the reserve requirement to increase the money supply. You increase the money supply, interest rates down, AD up. You raise the reserve requirement to lower the money supply. Right, the O in ROD is open market operations. This is the most used in the limited reserve system. Open market operations is the most used in the limited reserve system. And that is buy boom. So if the Fed buys bonds, money supply increases, interest rates are down, investment is up, AD shifts right. You sell suck. So if the Fed sells bonds, they're like destroying the money. They're taking the money out of the system. Okay. Interest rates up, investment down, AD down. And then finally, the discount rate. And the discount rate is the money that the Fed charges banks, all right, when they borrow. You lower to increase the money supply, because if interest rates are low, banks are going to want to borrow money, businesses are going to want to borrow money, investment up, AD right. If you raise the interest rates, businesses aren't going to want to borrow money. All right. And then there's the problems in controlling money supply. And I talked about those earlier, that you count on banks lending out money and people putting money in banks. And the last thing I think he talks about is the federal funds rate. And the federal funds rate is the rate banks lend each other. If I happen to be under reserve requirement at the end of the day, and I call up another banker and they'll lend me money federal funds rate. All right. All right. Is there any questions either on anything I went over or on the practice quiz? You could just type in the number if you want it on the practice quiz, or you could chat in a question in the chat. Anything you guys want. Number 7. Okay. Okay. If all the banks in the economy have the same reserve ratio as this bank, then an increase in the reserves of 150 for this bank has the potential output to increase deposits by. All right. So first, I want to find the reserve ratio. So what I would do there is it's 750 divided by 10,000. Of course, you put reserves over deposits. And that's going to equal 0.075. All right. Now I have to find out what is the money multiplier. So that's going to be 1 over the reserve requirement. So 1 divided by 0.075, and that's going to equal 1333. If I have 150 extra of reserves, just reserves, I'm going to times that by 1333, the multiplier, to see how much. And when they say deposits for all banks, that's the key to me to know that I'm using the money multiplier. So 150 times 13.33 gives you 2,000, C as in Caroline. I know I talked through that fast. Evan, is that good, or do you want me to go through it again? Okay. Now, if I'm looking at 7, a possible question could be, what is the money multiplier? What is the reserve ratio? I mean, we did all that. And of course, they could give a different number than the 150 in reserves. Or they could also say, like, Evan deposits 10,000. How much goes in required reserves? That would be 10,000 times 0.075. And then how much goes into excess reserves? Those are some of the other questions I could see. You'll have that same T balance chart, I would guess, tomorrow. Any other questions that people did not feel good about or would like me to go over? All right. Number 9 might be a little similar. Here you would take the reserve requirement, which is 9%, and times the 20,000 by 9. That would give you 1,800 have to be in required reserves. 2,000 minus 1,800 gives you a 200 in excess reserves. Now they could ask you, how about if they lend out that excess reserves? And then, you'd have to take the multiplier, which is 1 over 0.09. And that'd be like 200 times 11.11. They could also ask you, just like this is now, what is the reserve requirement? They gave you 9%, but if they didn't give you anything, it would be 2,000 over 20,000. So it'd be 10% there. Those are the type of questions. Looking at problem, we talked about 9, which of the following is correct? I think we have it. Okay. Anything else you guys want to go over? Okay, I'll be there tomorrow morning then. And also, I'll be in the ARC pretty much.